Demi Knight Clark here at FabTech 2025 on the show floor, which is very exciting. You said a Steminist, which I love. I've never heard that phrase before, but I love that because I know you are a big advocate for welding is STEM. That is on your website, which I had jotted that down because, yes, hashtag welding is STEM. But
we got out of that narrative about 20 years ago, and now we're finally accepting it.
Yes, exactly. So kind of just continuing our conversation, this show on women in the trades, why don't you just start off, let me know a little bit about who you are and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so my story is probably the origin story when I was born. Why I use Knight in my name, it's not because I'm from the South, even though I am. It's a lot of us use our middle names or our maiden names. And it's 3 names to your name. But my grandmother was one of the first female Rosies, well, first Rosies who were all female in World War II and welders. Wow. So her maiden name was Knight. So all the firstborn girls in my family have, since you at the time you had to take a husband's name or you didn't have a choice in your name.
Yeah.
There were no juniors and the thirds, the fourth, whatever. We're all named Knight in the middle, and so none of us have changed it when we got married.
That's awesome.
So I always use it no matter what, and so that's part of my origin story, is having a female that was strong in my life who did this very thing. And then an Army Ranger dad. So I was always doing in the 80s. I'm a feral Gen Xer, so I was always doing the Pinewood Derby cars with my older brother and soldering irons at age 5. So I was always working with my hands, and then kind of talked out of it in high school. So after taking Vo-Tech and industrial technology classes in middle school, I was probably the last generation to take that. That's when I got out and did the college thing and went into construction as a career for a lot of my career, and then decided, you know what, I'm going to go do the consulting thing, and then also start a nonprofit called She Built the City in 2019, right during COVID, and then started my welding journey myself. So for the last 5-7 years, taking all the training, getting whatever I could under my belt with MIG, TIG, stick, flux core, robotics now, and automation and laser, which I'm obsessed with, and founding a camp called Reimagined Rosies.
That is amazing. I mean, that is like just a laundry list of things. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell me about the Reimagining Rosies? Because this is like the first time hearing of it, and it just sounds really amazing. And that's truly what kind of makes up this conversation that we're having about women in the trades. And it seems like you're a huge advocate for that. So tell me a little bit more about that. Yeah.
So Reimagined Rosies actually started at this show last year. When we were in Orlando, I was waiting for the FMA podcast, and actually a friend to get off of his podcast. Yeah. And I was just sitting there texting, and Dana Brown from Sparkforce Foundation came over, started talking to me. I was talking about some of the workforce development, 18 and up, put into careers programs. We were doing some accelerated welding classes. And I said, I've always loved this middle school population, but I'm not an educator. Yeah. I don't know how to do this. Running a camp sounds really a lot. And you're running a day job, so how do you do this? And she was the one that removed all the barriers. She was like, I think this is the coolest thing for you to have some kind of STEM, really go the robotics side, really go the exploration side into the automation with middle schoolers, because they are digital natives, but then teach them to weld. So without that kind of little small nudge to get into this, we started 2 beta camps. So we did one that was in Title I school in Hemet, California, called Alessandro High School. And they were amazing, 36 just phenomenal kids from 11 to 17 who ended up building robots, meaning like welding huge scrap bin robots.
That's crazy.
We had curriculum, but we really gave them free license and range, which you don't always get in the CTE programs. It's much more like
rigid and
we're going to do plates today, and we're going to do all flux core. And that's all well and good. They're going to certify out and to test out with their weld tests. For a camp that's a week, we could say, hey, what do you want to dream of? Almost startup culture. What do you have in your head? Let's design, build it, and go find what you can find in the scrap bin. We didn't know how that would work. Our welding instructor, who was for the school, Josh, he had an open mind about it, but he was kind of like, I don't know. And it was amazing what they dreamed up. They wanted to end up doing a lunar rover, and so we started on some chassis and some other stuff, but so much fun. And then in July, we were able to go to Ad Astra at Starbase in Texas, and it was more of a charter school model, and that really turned it into my POV. seeing all these kids who could go in any direction that they wanted for college or career, they're training explorers. They're literally training kids to, if you're going out into space, you've got to be Han Solo or Rey or Finn from Star Wars. You're not only the pilot, but then you're the engineer, then you're fixing the plane and you're the mechanic, and then you have to go source parts and go kind of sell and trade and barter, and then you have to forage your own food or make your own food. So it's this whole broader spectrum. So I've been telling the welding and STEM story for about a year to 2 years, but now it's more of, hey, why don't we go even more global than that and say, we're training explorers, whether a kid ends up going to college and ends up being an engineer or a journalist versus a kid going to CTE. Why don't we train them all cross-functionally and expose them to all of this stuff? And then they make the choice. And we've trained an explorer in Gen Alpha. So that's kind of my new thinking is like, we're training explorers.
Yes.
Whether that's welding, that could be CNC machining and advanced manufacturing, or that could be English.
Yeah.
I'm still training an explorer. So, yeah.
That's incredible. Wow. And that does kind of bring us into a little bit more in the conversation of the skilled trades gap.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a huge topic right now for across the metals industry, across manufacturing, that we are seeing that. And I know the conversation that we've had a lot in our office, and even with previous podcast guests, is how AI is going to play into that, and how many jobs that might have been the more traditional route of going to the 4-year university and getting the degree, they might be the ones on the chopping block, versus we are needing now more than ever these people that can do things with their hands and the people in the trade. So where are you seeing that right now? Where do you think, in your opinion, where do you think that started, and where do you think that that's going to end up, and how do you think we can start moving towards closing that gap?
Yeah. I think to your first question of how did we end up here, I was part of that generation that it was eradicated. So I went to vocational tech in 7th grade. It was just part of middle school.
Wow.
It was 6th to 8th grade. And it sounds ancient, but in the 1990s, we literally did home economics for 6 months of the year, and we learned to cook and sew. And then we came back and we did industrial tech or VOTech, which was drill press, CNC machining, carpentry. I remember shellacking shelves, like with 100 coats of shellac. My mom still has that shelf. And just doing all the hands-on, what we would know of as a makerspace now. That was industrial tech, or VOTech back in the day of middle school. That was taken out when you had the rise of Y2K and the .com
I would have
boom.
loved to do that. I would have loved to be doing that.
Yeah, are definitely craving doing that.
Yeah.
But so we went out in '99 when we have what I call more of the Google economy came out, where we needed programmers, we needed COBOL and
coding,
analysts, and getting into the Python coding. It was a website-based world that we were moving into. So it was kind of a necessary, who knows how necessary, pendulum swing into tech. So you really had that eradicate out of school. It was replaced by after-school STEM programming, like robotics programming. So I think I see right now in 2025, we're at an inflection point where not only, I don't necessarily, I understand why it's still called a trades gap or a skilled trades gap or trade skills gap, but I see it more of, again, it's an inflection point just like 1999, 2000 was, of how far do we want to swing the pendulum and how much do we really need? Like, I remember coming into welding a couple years ago and everybody was like, we need 400,000 welders. And I'm like, okay, my business brain is thinking on this. Which welders, which process? No one could break it down to me of like, do we need shipbuilding and TIG welders or, whatever.
Who do you actually need?
Oil and gas in the middle of Texas, or rig welding. Do we need aerospace, primarily TIG and exotic alloys? And you get really technical, and they were already into the laser welding. Tell me the breakdown of, out of that 400,000, how many by process, and how far will that go if we don't have it? Because the inflection point is automation. So to me, I ask bigger questions of, is it really a gap, or is it an opportunity to say, right now, it could be, depending on the company and how far they let it go, do you have 0 people working on this and you are losing business, or do you have aging out workers that you need to try to reskill or upskill who want to stay in for another 20 years, which there is a lot of that we're not accounting for.
Really?
And I say monetizing in statistics. We're leaving that out of the statistics.
Okay.
They're choosing to stay. It's not because they can't retire. I talk to it's a lot of guys, but I talk to plenty of guys that are either going back and they've had their own companies, or they've been in a big industrial firm, and the overtime is great, so they choose to stay, or they have a chance to teach, so they'll let them be the instructors so the new population come in. And there's a lot of impact to that when you're at that age in your career. I know me at 48, I'm all about like, I could go make a ton of money, but how is that helping when I'm dust, right? I mean, the impact is in how can you pour
what are you
into
leaving
the next
behind?
generation.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies to look at that, to say, if it's not oh my gosh, we need 10 now and we can't hire fast enough of
we need to
this
teach.
human, we can use who we have on staff to say, how can we bring in the new populations, but then also, how much automation is solving for this and who needs to run that automation? Because I've never looked at this as it's replacing humans with either AI or automation, either the robots, cobots that are out on this field or show, or laser, which is
you need someone
dramatically
to work
reducing the uptime of training. You need someone that is going to be programming that, and that is its own training. So rather than saying replace one for the other, that's what we should look at, is like, okay, out of that 400,000, well, maybe it's only 100,000 that we need if we are pairing that with a robotic arm welder.
Teaching these in tandem.
That operator could be doing the work of 20 handheld welders. So those aren't people you're replacing. Those are deficits. That's a gap.
Yeah.
So really, do we need 100,000 or do we need 400,000? And that's going to be a moving target for the next 5 years. And then AI just further makes that a bigger decision to say how much of that can run autonomously.
Yeah.
But it's all opportunity as the business owner who can get costs down, but then also pull from a different population of kids. It's no longer the whole CTE versus college. These are explorers.
Yes.
So those after-school STEM robotic kids could be your laser welders in 4 years. Why aren't we looking at it like that?
So what is your best advice to those business owners that are running into that? Is it truly just going to these younger generations and investing in them? Or is it also teaching, like you said, the people that they don't want to retire yet, but they have to have those newer, I guess, more updated skills, would you say?
Yeah, I think many things can be true all at once. So everything you just said depends on the company, or it depends on the side of the industry that's trying to tackle this, but it should be a combination of all. And then as we go further and further into those buckets, like if AI is freaking everyone out right now, again, I always look at it as opportunity, like, well, let's lean into that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be afraid of it. I wanna know if this is coming. If I don't do something about it, that's my own personal stance.
Yep.
But someone's going to solve for this if I don't. So I'm going to lean into that for whatever degree I want to.
Absolutely.
So for AI, maybe that's only 10% of the conversation right now, but in 4, if not 2 or 3 years, it's probably going to be 60% of the conversation. But at least you've got it there on your parking lot to say at some point, yeah, let's bring this into the conversation.
We're not going to ignore it like it's not right here. It's going to happen whether or not we get on board
You
with
cannot just stick your head in the sand, and that's any industry.
Yeah.
But I see it a lot here because there's a lot of just paradigms, a lot of business models that have worked for a long time, and so there's no reason to change. And so that's why I think the whole, like, we have such a skills gap. That's why I question immediately, like, I hear you, I acknowledge that, but is it? Or is it more of, we need a combination of factors to come into play that we are solving for? That's not necessarily a gap. It's an opportunity to say, oh, wait, maybe we're just not leaning into our existing...
The people we have now.
People we have to say, what are you interested in? Or, hey, if you could retire tomorrow and we actually really needed you to, would you go do it?
Yeah.
Or, and then have it be masters of their own destiny of how much technology do they want to learn versus how many that are brand new entering the industry that you need to go and recruit. Right? So there's that conversation. And then it is, okay, if recruit is the thing, how far down the chain of age do we need to start? And we're seeing that younger and younger every day.
How young do you think right now? Because, I mean, you said you were doing that you said 7th grade?
Yeah.
And you were in, so how young are you seeing a lot of these kids, like, wanting to get into that now, or even showing the interest?
Yeah, we have like offline taught kids to weld as young as 6 years old.
Really?
Now that's a kid that has
shocks me,
spatial awareness.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just saying like, all 6-year-olds come over and let's let you weld. That's holding the gun with them. It's a lot. I would say it's welding quadruple light. You know, we're not sitting there putting them in a booth and saying, run this plate on 1/8 inch.
They're just getting the hands-on experience, but not truly
and understanding, you know, striking an arc, understanding running a bead, dealing with AC, DC electricity, something that is potentially very dangerous, but also very empowering, right? To say, oh, I want to keep doing this. It can be done at just about any age. It's more of saying, look at what they're remembering, and then also where you have, I keep using the term inflection points, the biggest opportunity for them to make some decisions. So right now, I think buildsubmarines.com and Blue Forge Alliance, they're going into elementary schools with the U.S. Navy and talking about shipbuilding. Now they're doing that with PVC pipe and building periscopes.
Yeah.
So it's age-appropriate stuff, but they're planting those seeds. Just
to know that it's not just the same path that I think, at least even when I was growing up, like you do definitely get this sense of as you're going through school, you're all kind of being guided towards that same exact path. Like you're in middle school and then you get to high school and now they're prepping you for college and everyone goes to college and you have to do that.
Right.
But I do love the fact that we're seeing so much more now that just like when we had Chris Lukey on the podcast, he was saying, obviously we still need the engineers and the people that are going to get those engineering degrees. But at the same time, we want the non-college paths and these technical schools and learning how to do things like welding. Those need to both be viable paths, not just for the longest time. And I even know, as you know, I had a mother who was in tech sales, but then my dad, he was always a laborer. He worked construction my entire life. So I kind of saw a little bit of both, like what you do when you go to college and then what you do if you went straight into the trades. And so I had the opportunity to see both sides of that. But I think just showing more kids now that those are both totally viable and one isn't seen as less than the other.
That's the biggest, is destigmatizing. I think when I got into welding, my biggest thing 4 or 5 years ago was like, I just want to destigmatize the trades. I'm sick and tired of fighting this fight with a lot of parents who are like, my kid is less than for choosing this route. When I have 19 and 21-year-old daughters, so I've raised a generation of 2 kids and their friends and been around all the parents and all the things where I've been in trades myself, and then seeing that kind of like, oh, you know, almost like a pat your head kind of thing. But then seeing this population of kids that has, I don't want to go down the like attention span road. We are a very immediate society. We have trivial consumption.
Instant gratification in the phones.
Digital natives times a million. They'll pick up a Voyager system that is, you know, your VR AR from Lincoln, and they'll teach us things about that because it's just so native to them to go down that road. And we don't give them enough credit for that, but they're craving the handheld stuff. Like, again, the pendulum, in my opinion, has just swung so far that when you do give them the opportunity to, I just call it be explorers and try things, and don't hold them accountable to say, oh, because you put, you know, we put a handheld torch in your hand and now you welded, and oh, by the way, your grades are kind of, you should be a welder. Stop with all that.
Yeah.
See, hey, that kid put a torch in his or her hand. They flew through it. We would test them out. And we've seen this in 12-year-olds. Like, I would put that kid through a weld test, like 2G weld test today after welding for 3 hours, because it just, the pickup rate is so quick. And we see that even in CT school. But don't talk them out of it. Just let them continue on that exploration. So if I was in your audience right now and you asked me that question of like, there's so much, it's overwhelming to think, who should you try to like pour into right now as your future employee? Middle school. 11 to 16 is absolutely the most impressionable age because they're not getting that chance to explore. Now more than ever in 2025 and beyond, it just doesn't exist as much. And then also the fact that it's pre-guidance counselor intervention. So to your point earlier, I don't want to give guidance counselors a bad rap, but they're
guided down kind of that
there
same
are
path.
State rewards for saying 98% of our kids are going to college.
Yeah.
So unless that pendulum was to swing more to say just as much career readiness is being rewarded, they're going to continue down that path. So getting to the kids to where they can be advocates for themselves when they do get to that guidance counselor
and
intervention
say, this is
16,
the path for me. And it's
like,
also it's totally like viable and completely fulfilling path as well. And I think that's talking more highly about it. Like
makes just as much money, if not more. I mean, I know people love to go down that, like, I could be a welder and make $200,000 a year. That's doing a lot of welding, and it's very specific. That's not every welder. There is an average set pay right now. But again, this generation, if you're talking about, if I'm going and doing camps for middle schoolers, they are your employee in about 10 years. So knowing how fast our technology is rolling, and just in 1 year alone of seeing how this is now 80-20 automation at FabTech, whereas last year was, I'm probably going to get the stat wrong, but it looked with my own eyes to be more like 60-40. In their lifetime, towards their career, they need to know robotics. They need to know the automation. So I challenge on the flip side of that, not just the employers, but also the CTE schools. How much are you getting into teaching the robotics, teaching the cobots, the robots? That is not only a great recruit mechanism, but also that is going to be a lot of their jobs. Yes, handheld welding is not going to die, but the robotics is going to be a huge part of it.
Yeah. And you're talking about some of these robotics. You said cobots, is that
collaborative robots?
Yeah, so I don't know as much about that at all, but tell me a little bit more, because that actually kind of introduces a lot of these emerging technologies that are coming out in our industry, because we are a tech company within this industry. So, but we're obviously we're a platform, we're a software, but I just find it super interesting to learn more about these. Just, you walk down the aisles at this show and it is insane, some of the stuff that you see. So tell me a little bit more, because I don't even know what the cobots are. I'd like to know a little bit more about
robots are when you're working alongside a human's pattern of what has been done versus traditional robotics, which, I mean, you'll see some amazing stuff that's happening on the show floor right now, being able to map and design the program themselves.
Yeah.
And now with AI assistance, they can fix themselves. What used to be, you needed engineers on a mission control, kind of like watching what's happening and being able to fix the brain. Now with AI, it can be intuitive to where it's, like in a shipbuilding application, or probably aerospace right now is a better example, where it can figure out its fail and deposition rates and all the things and fix it on the fly. I mean, literally fix it on the fly with
That's so crazy.
the AI brain behind it. So yeah, and again, we'll see. I don't use the word replace. We'll see what augments humans and or goes just so far beyond what we're even capable of doing with humans, because we are fallible. We do fail things. There's human error everywhere in our welds, which can be a great thing. But I think seeing that now out on the show floor, it's going to change everything we do. The AI piece is what I'm really fascinated by this year, just because we're definitely an industry that is used to having, here's products, manufacturers sell you products, here's the machines you want to put on your shop floor. And I saw that with lasers last year. It's like so many employers or so many shops were buying lasers, and then they're sitting in the back because there's nobody that's been trained on them.
To actually utilize it.
Yes, there's a safety issue, but then there's also, we don't know how to use this. We just hear that it's going to make us so much more efficient, all the things. So we've got to catch up in the training, and then also understand, the capacity of AI. Are we going to be hiring for AI-based welding engineers next year? They have to have some types of certifications, or are those the high schoolers? So it's mind-boggling, but then also exciting for me, who I just think if you can't see anything else positive because it's too scary for you to like wrap your head around, see the fact that we haven't solved for any of this, and there's a lot of things that can be true all at once. But when you dive into it, we're now being able to advertise to all populations of high schoolers. It's no longer, in my opinion, being kind of an outsider looking in for so many years and now in it. All these kids, when I start talking about, hey, would you be a welder at SpaceX, or would you be go into aerospace industry? It's like, whoop.
Yeah.
And they never would have been enticed at all by welding in the last couple of years.
Because like you said, it's totally foreign to them. They've now been growing up around so much technology and phones and everything that maybe a degree with something more like computers is kind of like, well, we're kind of used to that. But then when you're talking about things that they have never thought that they could even do at any point, like holding a blowtorch or doing any amount of welding in their lives, and you bring this up and they're like, actually, that is really cool. I would love to consider that. So it's just like even putting it in front of them and not just saying like, oh yeah, they're going into the trades, like, and putting it more as just how you explained it, like with SpaceX, like giving it a more real life, like that is an actual tangible thing that you could do if you put your mind to it, and kind of just changing the way that we talk about the trades.
Well, and I tell the Lincoln Electric folks all the time, because they have at their welding school, which is, to me, it's like the Super Bowl, Disney. Anytime I go to Euclid, Ohio and take classes, I feel like I'm with the best of the best. But multiple manufacturers have schools, but Lincoln has a 4-week robotic arm welding certification. 4 weeks, they get that certification, definitely have to go out into the wild and use it, but they're right alongside either welding engineers or structural engineers, mechanical engineers at these massive companies, and they didn't go to a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
That's one example. I think there's going to be more training to come, like in terms of laser welding, handheld and or robotic. And then also robot cobot certifications. I know AWS just put out their first one for robotic arm welding, where it helps these CTE schools say, okay, here's what we think is the standard, here's how long it should take, and now let's go get grant funding, whatever, to add that into our portfolio. And now let's go do it. We desperately need to go down that road, because right now their only options are to go get those 4-year degrees, which are still justly needed.
Yes.
I know every welding engineer that comes out of Ohio State, they never have to worry about a job. It's like within minutes they are hired.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we need the ones that are just going through the certification program and proving that that's almost like the new CTE. That's the new, hey, go. You could do the electrician thing. You could go do the HVAC if you're doing trades, or you could do robotics with welding. Get that same type of certification. Could go to community college maybe for a year, or just do the 4-week certification and go into the job and keep learning. Like, that's almost equivalent to an engineering job right now. So that, for parents especially, should destigmatize. But then also, I've got 2 in college right now. There has to be a ceiling to this at some point. But until there is, of cost, why we're not capitalizing on that even more right now is that you've got so many parents listening that may not have listened 5 to 10 years ago, because they're like, my kid's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. Their kid might not be doing that degree now, but you're still paying $50,000 a year. Of course the trades look good. So when you also say, well, this is STEM trades. They're working on the most advanced manufacturing systems you could think of. This is not a dirty shop floor.
No.
So why is there still a stigma? If that was kind of the case.
And what's funny is those are the same people that it's all stuff that we need. These are things happening in the background of our everyday lives. The building that we're in right now, someone had to
there's
build it.
Plenty of welds around here.
The bridges that we drove on to get to this building today, like those are all things that I'll speak for myself, that we normally don't have to worry about. We don't have to think about. I'll never, it'll just go right over my head. But those are things that we need in our society. And yet it's like the same people driving on said bridge that's like, the trades is kind of, so it's funny when you think about it in that aspect, because we need all of those people, but it's, for whatever reason, was so stigmatized for so long.
Well, someone gave me a statistic, and I wish I could give them the attribution, but you walk through over or under 750, at least 750 welded pieces every single day. So whether that's
really
we're in this
interesting,
building and we're walking under it, or a bridge that you're driving over, something you're walking under. The funny thing, I think, as welders, we all can't unsee is good or bad welds, but I can't, like, we have season tickets to my daughter's college football, and I can't go through like a stadium and not be looking around and being like, ooh, rate the welds, not loving
You're
that
like,
60 years old and not really structurally sound anymore. It's about a 5 out of 10 on the MIG rating, but and then my kids will send me pictures where they are at an
look
airport.
at this.
They're like, Mom, look at the airplane wing, and I'm like, you may or may not want to get on that airplane.
You're like, as you're actively sitting in this seat on the airplane, I'm going to not tell you how bad I think.
And I'm not even like a CWI. I can't even imagine if I was a welding inspector. They must be like, I have to close my eyes a lot.
Right. As they're looking at things that are over our heads, and you're like, it definitely could have been better, but okay.
I don't know. Maybe it proves the case that you don't need as much skill, but I don't think it does.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I definitely want to pivot to obviously kind of continuing the conversation on women in the trades. So specifically, what has your experience been overall? I mean, obviously very positive, but working in a mostly male-dominated industry and really making a name for yourself. Like, truly, it's like just all the work that you've done so far. How has that experience been for you as a woman?
Yeah, I would say growing up in my career and then having kids when I was in my late 20s and trying to do the daycare thing. I mean, that's such a thing for women in any industry right now. For millennial women. And it makes me so sad that we still haven't figured it out. Like, my generation was the one that not only did we come into a male-dominated industry, which there are multiple of those, it's most industries, unfortunately, but really in construction, it's very, at the time when I got in, like 2003, it was definitely ego-driven. There was a lot of just relationships that were good old boys. And I would say that to their faces to this day. I also chose to do that because I was always comfortable thanks to an Army Ranger dad and being friends with guys in high school. It was just more comfortable to be around.
You weren't threatened by
male
going into something
yeah,
like that.
I definitely got the knocks. I definitely got, you know, people that wanted to talk to my boss when I was managing a city. And you just have to, the 20-something-year-old me would be like, that makes me so angry. The 48-year-old me looks back on that of like, I'm glad you went through that, because now you have the perspective of saying, how do I want that to change now? And if there's still a paradigm of only like 4%, that's why I jumped even further into welding, because it was like 4% were women in welding. And my grandmother would be rolling over in her grave. You know, I mean, her whole generation did what they did that it would hopefully be progressive moving forward. And it just made me, like, I solve for things. It drives me nuts when there's things to solve for. So that was my biggest, when I first got into the industry of welding on that side. And now that I'm here, I have a more global view of it, because I think it's just diversifying in general. So yes, we need more women, but we can't just, I'm only one lived experience of a woman. I identify as white, you know, so we need women of all color. We need people who identify as everything. We need men of color. And we just need welders, really. We need whatever explorer that we're going to build with whatever ratio of automation and technology and handheld welding. We need kids who want to do this. So I have globalized my focus to say, yes, we need women. And there is definitely a specific way you have to speak to women and also create an environment that is comfortable for them. But at the same time, we need everybody. So how do we speak to all of them and make it, because one thing that I saw in this last 10 years was going into classes, seeing only one girl or seeing only one woman. It's the same in engineering. And then saying, hey, let's talk to you. They also don't want to be singled out. They're already singled out enough.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's definitely a barrier of entry. So I try to figure out, like, how can I make it you're one of many? So every time I can walk into a classroom where there's at least 3 girls or 3 women, my best example was having 7 women out of 15 at Alessandro High School when I went to California a couple of years ago for a Women at Work campaign. And the vibe was totally different. It wasn't about like, hey, here are the girls in the class. Can you talk to the girls? And they're like segmented off.
It was like, let's talk to everybody.
Like, there was no bro culture. It was, these girls took up space. They were absolutely respected by the guys because there was enough seats in the room at the table that it was a non-issue. So I try to look at it like that, of saying like, I will definitely do women-focused events. I'll do whatever it takes to see more girls and women in the trades. But I want to see it as being, hey, we need everybody, and to make it as equitable as possible, how do we get it to where it's not about just saying, how do we get more women here? They're more comfortable being generalized and saying like, oh, I just want to try this, just like the guys want to try this. Because honestly, when you look at the stats, guys aren't being introduced to welding either. So it just needs to be introduce all kids.
Everybody,
and then take a look at the population, and do you have enough girls in the room to be introduced to it, rather than making all-girl cohorts? Because when I started She Built the City, which was more like carpentry trades and getting them into like what would be called the true trades, we were doing girl-only cohorts and things of that nature. And I think there's definitely work to be done there. But what I saw was even more of an opportunity to say, hey, these girls have to go to work with guys sooner rather than later. So how do we make this across
you can't keep separating it like over and over. You still have to kind of
there's some
meld
safety to
together.
it for sure. There's definitely positives to having all-female cohorts. But I think my personal opinion is to see it in small groups, and then they've got to be introduced to the greater whole. And then that's why I like middle school, because since nobody's been introduced, you can make it about everybody.
Very even playing field there.
And then say, hey, what girls do I really see a spark in, like quite literally, and how do you feed into that to kind of like light the light bulb, and then she's going to light other light bulbs, and we can talk to administrators and things like that. But I think it's got to be more organic. It's not go after women in welding, because they're like, whoa, and that's a lot.
That's a good point, like you said, because I didn't even think about it that way, that they don't want to be singled out even more than they already are. If they're that one girl in the classroom of all boys.
Well, and think about middle school anyway. They're dealing with enough emotionally, maturity-wise.
It's a rough time.
The last thing they want is a label on their head of like, the girl in
you're
CTE.
the girl in the room.
Right.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to even put that. And in my mind, I'm like, you if you want more women in the trades, you go for more women. But that makes sense that it's more, no, let's everybody. The door needs to be open for everybody, not just women.
I will say there's something that I'm really fascinated with this year that I kind of started into last year when I was working with girls and women of creating safer spaces to where they could be really honest. And I mean, the problem when you do have one girl, and this is industry agnostic, it could be any industry, is they feel like they have to be perfect. They cannot mess up in front of the guys. It's extreme pressure that they're putting on themselves and or being the only one in the room. There's nothing to diffuse that for them. So a lot of times they're going to quit. If they don't feel like they're perfect, of course they're going to be like, I'm substandard in this. Meanwhile, the guy's making a 70% grade and doing just fine because there's 20 of them. And that's no offense to the guy. It's just the comfort and safety and being able to take up space in the room, right? That is definitely the challenge. And I see why there's cohorts, but there's something called third spaces that's a bigger communication chain right now, which is to the point of kids not being able to be exposed to more hands-on anything anymore because of digital world. We've really eradicated what's named as a third space. So a first space is considered home. A second space, depending on your age, would be work or school.
Yes.
And then third spaces used to be community centers, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs, movie theaters, malls, places that teenagers could go if they couldn't drive or not
kind of
have
the extracurriculars,
libraries, like places where things were going that they could explore. Yeah, we can opt into after school for kids, especially if you're affluent. Not everybody's affluent and can pay for all this after school programming or travel team sports and all this stuff. But there is definitely an opportunity for us to combine all of that, of saying, how can we make these diverse third spaces again that these kids crave? Because when we make them for them, like in camps, they love using their hands. They love to get off of the technology for a while.
And it's not like they don't feel forced to be there. It's not like when they might feel even in school where you're like, I have to be here because my parents want me to be here. But it becomes this like they are willingly showing up every day to be in this space.
And so I do think there's an opportunity. I don't have it all figured out, but if people want to start exploring like, wow, she's saying a lot of stuff that could be confusing. If you're really trying to tackle the women part, like make a third space that's also safe, could just be this like malleable population where sometimes it's all kids, sometimes it's just women, sometimes it's just the guys, sometimes it's more of a diverse population or it's multilingual. It's just looking at it more globally rather than just saying like, we need somebody gave me this when I first got into welding. They gave me this to think about where he was like, he was not trying to be argumentative. He was certainly not trying to be anti-women in the industry, but he was like, just tell me the business case for having more women on my job site.
Which is a realistic
question.
thing to ask. Yeah.
And it's like, does gender make a difference? And you could go down that bunny trail, not for us to solve for this podcast.
Yeah.
But it really did make me think like, I can see how they're looking at that and really you could globalize that to just diversification in general. And what I come back to is absolutely hear and acknowledge that point. I don't know if I have a total answer for that. Should it be 100% women on your job site? Probably not. But at the same time, it's more of a recruiting thing of like, listen, if you're able to recruit everybody, you have way less of a recruiting problem.
Yep.
So if it's always been one population that is coming your way and that population isn't enough anymore, that's a different story. But yeah, if you're just saying like, have more women to have more women, like what is 50-50 going to do for you? Is it going to make you more efficient? Is it going to make it a better culture? I've seen some where, again, that's why I say that the supportive environment is just as important as recruiting, because we could go hire, depending on a company, 50% women coming into the next training class, but because it's an older culture that may not be conducive to that, it's actually more problematic because there's some bullying going on. There might not be the adequate PPE on site, which is so basic, of smaller PPE. There might not be showers on site or even a women's restroom. Like, are you prepared? If you want to have 30 to 50% women on your job site or in your shop, whatever the roles may be, are you going to be able to keep them? Or is it just you're shoving them in there with everybody else and like, oh, we have women now, like
people will finally get off our
check
case
the box.
about it. Yes, 100%.
I start when people say that to me, I immediately start asking questions.
Are you actually prepared
awesome.
For that?
Is it like, how's it going for you? Like, I want to be curious. I don't want to come after them about it, but how's it going? Like, do you feel like you're learning in a supporting
and creating
environment?
a conducive environment? Yeah, just like you said, of actually welcoming all these women in, or are you just saying that to say it?
Yeah, like I've checked the box. Now you can't come after me because I don't have enough women. And I do see that sometimes with, somebody told me that a CEO friend was like, well, you create kind of safe spaces for C-suite men to be able to talk about this and say like, oh, so I don't have to have 50-50 women? I'm like, I don't know. Do you? But you can dialogue about it. Because, I mean, imagine you can't really take a stage when you're a CEO and you're hired to be a CEO to be the head chopping block, right? If stuff goes wrong, they come back to you and say, why weren't you making your sales numbers or efficient, or the hiring is off, or the culture is off? Ultimately, that's going to be you on that end of the stick for that, accountability-wise. So if that's the case, it's very hard if you flip side them to say, you know what, we're failing at recruiting.
Yeah.
So I kind of come at them in a safe space, like at an airplane or, at a lunch talk, and say, just unpack this for me. What is it about wanting to have more women on staff or diversifying your staff is that? And again, I think I try to lay on now more of the technology piece and saying, hey, do you need more people, or do you need more of a combination of really making smart humans that can run a lot of stuff for you? And then also that opens up the door to diversifying your recruiting population. You could go after more schools that have more women or more minorities that actually go to that school, because they are interested a little more in robotics, and you can backdoor the handheld stuff. So I think it's super complex, but unless they can talk about it, we're never going to actually really address it. Otherwise, it's like, no, I did that. I'm an ally.
You have to actually welcome the conversation if you truly want to get into kind of the nitty gritty about it. You can't just expect the answer to the question of like, yeah, we'll do that. You have to actually expect like, okay, but why are we doing it? All of those kind of follow-ups, like you said, and like, are you prepared to actually welcome them in? Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Which I've never thought about that before, and that makes total sense. So just to kind of wrap up a little bit, if you were talking directly to a young woman or a young girl right now, what would your best advice be to a young girl wanting to be in the trades, or preparing to be in the trades, or wanting to do welding more specifically?
Yeah, get in there and do it. I'm a little more age specific about it. So if it's an elementary schooler, and we've seen them, we've seen girls and boys who are, farm kids, whatever, and they're just like zooming it out in their 6 to 9-year-old years. Be an explorer, try everything, fail at it. I tell the middle schoolers that, because again, their generation which is Gen Alpha, not only are they digital natives, but they're also taught to be like, don't fail, like get it right, do well, do all the things. We need kids failing forward, because if they fail at welds, make bad welds, run terrible passes with the incorrect machine setting, try anything that you're curious about. I think they're already native to being curious on TikTok, and they're all YouTubers. They will suck up everything in YouTube, like consumers. So go do that with handheld anything. If you want to try carpentry, go do it. You have the opportunity to do it. Get into a makerspace. Parents, get your kids using anything with their hands just to explore. So they have that in their tool belt of knowledge to start once they do have that guidance, counselor, intervention. And that girl, or wanting to get it in the trades, I say, now go and figure out getting the job that nobody else wants to do. And like you said, better advocate for themselves too when they're in those conversations. At such a young age, when, at least from what I experienced, you have no clue what you want to do yet. Yeah. Like when you're in high school. That's okay. Yeah. But at least giving just more exposure to things for them to be able to be like, I did Demi's camp, and I actually think I really might be interested in doing something like that for my future. Like even putting that in front of them, like, just so you know, this is an option for you. So I think I totally agree with all of your points. And I think that that's going to be the biggest thing. And hopefully that we see that more moving forward too. When we need to stop putting pressure on these kids to know after trying something once that should be their career path. I say this to electrical unions all the time, where I'm like, y'all have a phenomenal 4-year journeyman apprentice, paid for, get paid while you work, all the right selling points, jobs, but we don't give them an opportunity to explore and try the electrical field in middle school, minus if they're in STEM robotics, they do. They don't get a chance to try that, so they're going straight in, and you want 100% to stay. We can't expect that when they've never tried it, but now they're committing 4 years of their life. We don't do that with college. The average college attendee has spent 2.5 years in high school researching and or visiting and or going down that road with a guidance counselor of what they should be and where they should go. Why are we not doing that with middle schoolers with the trades? So that's a real question. So again, we have phenomenal end user programs for what I call butts and seats. You know, the job itself. But we don't have the exploration paths that we desperately need. And that's why I tell everybody, if you're curious to get in with middle schoolers and Gen Alpha. They will be your employees in 4 to 8 years.
And truly, isn't that, I mean, not that everything should revolve around work and finding a job, but obviously we all know that's kind of how the world works and need money to survive. So you might as well do it doing something you love, doing something you're passionate about, doing something that we also need. We need more of you. So at the end of the day, it's a little funny, isn't it, that we're always expecting everyone to go to college, but that college does not guarantee you a job at all. So it's so funny because I mean,
batch of graduates is showing that.
And the placements with, it seems like the placement, I don't know the numbers, you probably know them much better than me, but the placements with jobs placement out of the trade seems much higher. I would imagine that it is, because it just seems like these fast track programs to be able to just put you where you need to be and just as quickly as possible, which I just find very interesting that kids sometimes, stigmatize that and look down on that when it's like, don't you want your kid to have a job? Wouldn't it be interesting having that, just something that they might be super good at and very passionate about as well, even if it's not sitting in a college classroom somewhere? Or working retail. I mean, if DoorDash is your only option, which is respectable, why? You can't knock the $22 an hour coming out of a welding school as too low when we've got gig workers just making it work right now. So it should, again, we have about 100 factors right now that should be destigmatizing trades. Just naturally, right? Yes, for sure. Well, this was a fantastic conversation, and honestly, I think so much of what we talked about will resonate with the audience, and just the conversations around the trades gap and also just women in our industry. So I so appreciate you taking the time to do the podcast.
Me.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and I hope you have a great rest of your Fab Tech.
Same.